Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Kate Murphy, an adoptee and a therapist as well. I'm looking forward to our conversation, Kate.
Yeah, I am too. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah.
You're welcome. This lights up my day, these conversations. And you're saying just before we started recording, you speak to adoptees every day. So we found our worlds, haven't we, really? Well, I found my own, the way it sounded like you kind of, that's what we found. We've got to find that space.
Yeah. I feel so blessed. Being a therapist is a second career for me. And so when I became a therapist, I knew adoptees were people who were adopted were part of who I wanted to work with. And yeah, it's just, it's grown and grown to where it's now a very regular, people who were adopted are a very regular part of my caseload, or prominent part of my caseload is probably a better way to say that. And I just, there's a special connection. So, yeah.
So how, before we dive into the topic that we thought of, just a thought about that. This being a second career for you, do you think that's important, or to what extent do you think that's important, or
Well, actually, looking through the lens of adoption, I think it's common. Not all people who are adopted, but I think I see patterns of it's hard to claim what you want. It's hard to say this is what I want to do, and if there's any kind of dissension around you, to kind of stick to that when you're trying to make others happy. Also, just I think getting a later start. It's not unusual. I hear people who, I started college, I went to a bunch of different colleges, I ended up graduating later, or I shifted midstream. And so I think I can absolutely relate to that. I wanted to be a psychologist since I was like, I don't know. And I'm not a psychologist, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, but that's what I wanted to do since I was like 8 years old. And my family was not a family of human service type folks. And it's, to this day, my mom will still be like, what do you do exactly? Do people really just talk to you about their problems? That's so foreign to her. Like, why in the world would you want to sign up to do that? And so for me, I think, that piece of my adoptedness, I think, is the second career piece. In terms of how it informs my practice, I do have experience out in the world. I have experience, getting 700 emails and wondering how the heck you're going to get through that and still balance your family life. And, work is just this encompassing, part of your life and identity, and how to find some balance there. I mean, I can really relate to that, having been in a different world before I was a therapist. Yeah. So does that answer that?
Yeah. What was coming to my mind was a kind of like a maturity, like an understanding of how other people work. So the flip side of this, and it's not an adoptee thing, is that a lot of politicians here in the UK, and I don't know whether it's the same in the States, they've gone to prestigious universities. They've worked, maybe they've worked in a think tank, or maybe they've gone straight to be like an assistant to another politician. But they have spent their life in politics and not understanding a broader context to that. They've spent their life in education or in politics. They've never ever created something other than words. A lot of them are ex-lawyers. So they're great at creating words, which are great for press releases and speeches, but creating something in the world requires something more than just words. Words are too easy, and so that's what I was thinking about. That being a licensed social worker, that you've got the broader view of people. You've dealt with people at different ages, different abilities, different emotional intelligence, different IQ, different intelligence stuff. So it's kind of more, it's more round, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A better view of human nature, not just.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, it's not dissimilar, by the way, in the United States with our politicians, what you just described. But I think about when I was I was just starting to go to grad school. So I was mid-40s. And I remember talking to the department chair about, you know, I'm really nervous about this. If I don't do well, you know, I've literally quit my job. This needs to work. You know, I was very anxious. I would be described as a type A human, recovering now. But anyways, but he was like, you know, actually, this is one of the few careers where a little age on the face is, you know, a benefit. And starting this job later in life, when you have exactly what you just said, when you've got some maturity under your belt, when you have some life experience under your belt, it is actually, you know, a benefit, and it will, you know, it will be fine. You will be fine. And that to me was just like the most settling thing, that I always, you know, feel so grateful for that man.
Yeah. And that landed for you, because you could have easily just, that fact could have just kind of passed you by, couldn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was said at the right time in the right place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
by the right person too, actually.
The right place. Yeah. And it's the space. Is it this? It's the space. I mean, that's what you're trying to do, I guess, with your clients. You're trying to create the relationship, space, and the empathy to allow them to open up. So, and it's different, interesting sort of juxtaposition or paradox between that side and like your mum's generation saying, do people really?
Yeah. And so you can imagine, I grew up in a home where it wasn't that you couldn't be sad, you know, or angry, but not for very long, you know. And so for myself, you know, coming into the world and doing my own therapy so that I could tolerate my own feelings, you know, and I could actually talk about my own feelings. You know, I would have not been a very good therapist at all in my 20s, because I was so buckled up and so well defended against not presenting a positive image. So and helping people get to where that feels comfortable. And slower is generally better, especially when you're dealing with trauma. And of course, adoption is trauma. And that can be hard. It can be hard as the client when slower is better, because you just want to feel better. You know, you want, like, get me out of this pain already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting word that you say, tolerating our feelings. I've never heard that, you know, that verb used with that noun before. I've never heard.
Yeah. How does it feel?
Yeah, well, it feels. Did you see what she did there, listeners? She flipped it straight back on the questionnaire. Love it, brilliant. Yeah. Well, I think about worrying about worrying. That has been my thing, my probably my Olympic sport, really, or my, you know, I don't know whether I would have got gold, but I probably got into the final. And we are, as a society, you grew up in California. A guy I know who, kind of a mentor guy, he's in California now, but he was originally from the East Coast. He talks about, this is a guy called Michael Neal. He talks about emotophobia, Notophobia. So we have developed a phobia about our emotions, and obviously it's going to be the negative ones.
Yeah, I like
we're gonna have the phobia of, and I would say, yeah, for me, worrying about worrying. So there would be, and most of this was business, right? Not adoption stuff. Worrying about the business, and then going on a course, and they say something like, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself," which is a Roosevelt quote, I think. And then you think, oh, and then somebody shows you a clip from The Secret in the early 2000s, and you're thinking, okay, my worrying about business will make the business go south. So then you worry about worrying, and then, or me, I worry about worrying, and then I've been on this course, and I've spent some time and I've spent some money on this course, and then I am worrying about worrying because I'm thinking, how come I'm still worrying because I've spent this money and time? How come I'm still worrying, and I shouldn't worry because the worrying is going to impact the bottom line of the business. I'm going to start manifesting poor financial results in my business. And then what this guy Michael Neal would say is then we become morons. We have more on our minds.
That's a good one. I like that. I do remember that.
Yeah. And I guess how that plays into what we were talking about before we hit the record button was this negativity bias.
Yeah. So a couple of things that popped for me as you were talking. One, I want to say I can relate to that worry upon worry upon worry. Back when it was again, probably early 20s, I had a boyfriend that made a little cartoon of me. He was an artist, of a warrior, and it said "the worrier," because that was my pastime. Worrying about work, worrying about whatever. But part of what we realize, well, one with the negativity bias. So from an evolutionary standpoint, we want to look for what might harm us, right? So back in prehistoric days, we needed to know, is that stick a stick or is it a snake? And if it's a snake, is it a poisonous snake? And will I be harmed and will I be killed? And is that the end of my line of, humanity? But our brains still kind of work that way, right? So when we see something that might cause us harm, like spending too much money on a class or having negative thoughts, therefore I'm not going to have any business. We kind of put it in the same realm of, this is a poisonous snake who's going to kill us. And that's why those things stand out so strongly, instead of things like, you had a great customer praise, you had a lovely moment with a partner, or your dog, and you sat on the couch. I love your pillows back there, and you had an amazing morning just snuggling with dogs. Those things, we might like them in the moment, but we're not going to fixate generally on them. We're going to fixate on, I spent too much money on this course, or my boss gave me some bad feedback, and it might not even have been bad. It might have been like, I wish you were on time. So we are pretty prone to noticing these things, and there's a reason, but we can train our brains to maybe go a little easier on ourselves when we're in that space, so that they can not take over to such a degree, like, oh gosh, yes, I get so worried when I spend too much money. I understand. We're kind of showing ourselves compassion. And then the other piece is, and this is the part that I think in therapy is so inspiring to me, it's like, let's get past this noise. All the worry is noise. Some of it might be good, it might get us going, but it's noisy. And so what's really going on there? Is it sadness? Is it some disappointment? Is it fear? These emotions down here beneath the worry, or where we want to get to, so that we can spend some time. And why am I afraid? Why am I sad? What desire isn't being met? What part of my younger self is being activated? How can I show compassion? How can I learn to show compassion for my younger self? This is all that work, so that we can tolerate, like I was saying, we can sit in sadness, and it doesn't take us down. We don't become depressed for years, because I think our fear is, if I open up these channels of real emotion, I'm just going to be pulled under, and I'm never going to get anything done. I'm going to be engulfed.
Yeah.
Does that kind of resonate?
It does. And I funnily enough, use that engulf word
Mhm.
quite a lot. So there's the toleration of feelings, and then there's a fear of them engulfing us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we numb. And as you were talking, I thought about Pamela Karanova, a guest on the show, who had a long I think she used the word relationship with alcohol, which is I think that's one of the but she talks about the alcohol drinking as numbing, and numbing coming from fear of engulfment, or whatever the noun is that goes with engulfing, and then the freedom that came when she saw for herself that those feelings couldn't kill her. Essentially, they couldn't drown her. They couldn't engulf her. And when we stop fighting the feelings, or numbing to avoid the feelings, we see that they are essentially benign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that they actually bring depth to our life. And easier said than done, but it does lead to a much more present life, whether it's drinking or work, or scrolling on your computer, or playing games, whatever your choice of numb is. Yeah.
It's interesting you talk about the work one.
Mm-hmm.
The workaholics and workaholic women. I think when I see stuff, I'm quite susceptible, right? So I take stuff on. I get taken in by stuff. So it's almost as if I saw something in there's a new Facebook group by an adoptee, and it's about adoptees in the workplace. And how does being adopted affect you?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting kind of context to look at it. I think that's where I saw it. But then I thought, oh well, maybe I'm a workaholic. Like people say, oh Simon, you're doing so much, you're doing so much stuff, and you're putting out some, and nobody else does a podcast every day, and I really enjoyed the podcast, and then but suddenly I see something that says workaholism, and my negativity bias takes something that I love doing, something that does not consume my life in a bad way. It consumes my life in a good way, I guess. I don't know, who knows. But it takes something that I enjoy doing, and puts a little, and I'm putting a little, my internal negativity bias is putting a little stamp of negativity, a workaholism on it. I fall for it quite easily. It's a bit of a weird one.
Yeah. But I know, I actually know the post you're talking about. I'm not on Facebook that much in these groups. I actually commented on that post. That's so funny.
Wow.
Yeah. But I think for for what you're talking about, and I guess my question is, would you have considered yourself in like a younger self, past life, would you have been a workaholic with that, or does that not feel like a way
Well,
you lived your life?
yeah, it does feel that. It does feel
It
like that.
does.
And
Okay.
it does, yeah.
So here's where I'm going with this that I think is important. And I have to do it all the time too, because certainly that was my, drug in quotes of choice. Yeah, work, 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 you get praise, you get, it's connection. It's yeah. It was great for a while until it
It's
wasn't.
not the drug of it, there's no choice going on there.
But that's the thing, is that work we have to do. We generally need finances. It's kind of like if you have an eating disorder, you've got to still eat with alcohol, and it's not easy to quit drinking at all. But you could potentially live your life without drinking alcohol. You can't live without food, and you probably can't live without working. And so what I do for myself now, and I think for you, so what you just said, you enjoy these conversations. It's not impacting you can ask yourself, is it impacting my relationships? Are people around me complaining? Am I losing sleep? Is it impacting me negatively? And if the answer there is no, well, great, carry on. And I have to do that too with myself sometimes. Like, am I scheduling too much? I'm feeling tired. Am I potentially going in the direction that the groove I can very easily fall into? And if I am, I need to be aware. And for me personally, the way I want to live my life, I need to course correct, because I know that I can get a bit obsessed. And I don't really want to lead like the second half of my life that way. I don't think it makes me a good therapist at all if I'm tired and worn out. And so does that,
Yeah, it does, yeah.
yeah.
So to draw attention to the suggestion, is first off, is it's not a drug of choice. It's not. It isn't a choice. It's not a conscious choice.
Yeah.
It's something coming back. Maybe it's something coming from our conditioning, and that's another one where I can I can be susceptible to that. Right. Well, you're working so hard because you are adopted and you've got something to prove. Really? No, I'm working hard because I don't. Yeah, I want the business to succeed, and the big one for me on this was because I think that's going to make me happy. Right? That I'll be happy when. So I'll be happy when I've got. I'll be happy when I've found my second career. I'll be happy when I've got my mortgage paid off. I'll be happy when the business. We're all playing a different. We're all putting a different X at the end of that.
Yeah, and it's delayed. It's delayed
it's delayed gratification. And when we were talking before about, you and me have found our niches or stumbled into our niches. I mean, I didn't want to be a podcaster when I was 8. You wanted to be a therapist in your own. So there's some differences. But I was chatting to my cousin's husband this morning, and his younger son is like early 20s, and he's a lighting technician in the music industry. So he goes with the bands on tour and rigs the lights, right? And he says he was born to do that, right? And he's found that, and he's whatever he is, 22, 23, something like that. He's found that. So not all of us are destined to find these human services kind of things that you're talking about. It's all different. But yeah, I think that is the biggest myth that we buy into in the West. I'll be happy when. XXX happens.
Mm-hmm.
And how I see that, shaping for adoptees is this: I'll be happy once I've been reunited, or
Mm-hmm.
I'll be happy once I've, and it don't work like that, for the fundamental reason that happiness is internal and inside.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's in those, it's how do I be happy right now, or whatever I am, but how do I be present in this moment? I might end up with something I want in the future, but I might not. And if my happiness is dependent upon this fixed thing, that I'm not setting myself up for success, right? In terms of living a life that feels comfortable. Yeah. And I think you said something, I kind of got a little shiver when you said that I think is so hard, is I do think there's a common drive. If I find out who I am, if I'm reunited with my original family, if I just know the details of what the hell happened, with my relinquishment, then I will be happy. I will be cured, I don't know if that's the right word, but like some kind of I will be whole again, or yeah. And it's such a drive. And of course, as you know, reunion does a lot of things for us. Finding out all or some, usually it's some of our original story. It's very healing. And a piece of that can be very grounding, but joyful happiness is not generally a part of it. Um, it's so hard, and it just stirs up, gosh, so much loss and so much grief and confusing feelings.
and there's the whole gamut, the whole range,
Mhm.
of the whole range of outcomes,
Mhm.
and the the most massive thing for me in this is that, like, we're putting our happiness on hold. We don't
Mhm.
need to.
Yeah.
We don't need to do that. And I got an email from a yeah, I was somebody that I'd invited on the show, and she was saying to me, fellow adoptee, she was saying that she was asking me questions, and as it became apparent that she believed healing was impossible without reunion,
Oh.
and that doesn't stack for me at all, because people say to me, "Well, are you in reunion, Simon? You seem to be doing okay." Yeah, most of the time. Yeah, I've ups and downs, but most of the time, I'm doing fine. But where you're in reunion? No, I found out that she died. Oh, that must have been so terrible for you. Well, it wasn't actually. It was. There was a little bit of sadness there, but no, it wasn't the end of the world. Oh, I mean, and then, like, really stunned by that. And I said,
Mhm.
well, no, I'd had my big healing moments before that, when I found the reason for the reason for the adoption was one part. All the work that I've done on myself in the previous 6 years, that had been a big part of it, before I'd even started searching. And when I got this file about with with the letter about the teddy bear, which showed how much she loved me when a long time before she died. So it's all those bits. We're not saying, but this adoptee was certain. Her worldview, her perspective was, you can't heal without reunion. And then I guess other people might say, well, you can't heal without a good reunion. And then we're in the lap of the gods, then, aren't we? We've got, you know, like,
Yeah, my gosh.
but
Yeah.
what do you do you hear?
Well, when
What's
you
like?
first said that, I think my reaction was like, whoa, if that's the only way we can be happy, we're sort of doomed. And we're not doomed. I want to be really clear,
Yeah.
at all. Um, yeah, but I could see, I mean, I understand though, and I don't know this person or her history or had she been in reunion, but at all. But I think that idea is certainly out there. And it certainly is out there as folks are deciding to search. And, like this, I think frequently is an expectation. And that's where so much, dysregulation happens when even if it's a pretty good reunion, the internal feelings and disruption and shift of your own personal narrative that happens with reunion, good, bad, or ugly, is, it's hard, it's challenging. Usually, some people maybe not, but there's going to be some disruption in your life.
So a lot of the people that have been
That's
on
what comes
the,
to mind for me, I guess, was
sorry,
like, boy, when you said that, I was just like, whoa, boy,
yeah.
that's a hard
This
belief.
is, but what
Yeah.
we're doing is
Yeah.
we're talking about the different perspectives, and
Mhm.
we're
Mhm.
shining a light on people's, the
Yeah.
expectations. One is the world is the one that
Right.
really,
And when that expectation isn't met, and it's so different than what was what the thought and the dream and the fantasy was, it is. I mean, you're having to grieve that. You're having to deal with, gosh, I don't even know how to be in relationship with these new people I'm meeting. They don't want to be in relationship with me. And that may be a new experience. And yeah, yeah.
the holding our expectations lightly, or having no expectations whatsoever,
Mm-hmm.
seems to be. So I've had a few people on the show who are adoptees and non-adoptees who help adoptees find birth
Mm-hmm.
family, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what they say. That's what they're about. Now it's kind of easier. It's easier said than done, right?
It is. I have that in a blog somewhere too about tips for reunion, like trying as best as you can to have some low expectations. And of course, easier said than done. But at least if that can be out there as like hey, this might be challenging. Try to manage the expectations, at least as some direction. If somebody is even seeking help before they get into reunion, I think so often I see people, they've gotten the DNA test, I found my family, I immediately sent contact information to everyone, and wow, now it's kind of a really challenging situation, to do things in a really slow, methodical way. Some people do that, and I do think there tends to be a better outcome, a little less emotional, harm.
Yeah.
But it's hard to do when after all these years you haven't known anything, and now you have this, landslide of details. It's awfully hard to say, I'm gonna, wait and be careful. And
Yeah.
I think that's hard.
There was another adoptee who works with other adoptees as a therapist on the show a while ago, and she said she gave a really good reason why it might be tricky, in the fact that um, the birth mother may not have done any work, right? So
Right.
they may not have been, the shame may have locked them down so far. Oh, that's an interesting one. I put a post out on Facebook Friday, I think, saying any adoptees interested in coming on the show, and one adoptee said, when I'm thriving. Right? I said, oh, right, okay. So that I thought interesting. That was interesting. Market, well, audience information, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't divide the world into thriving and non-thriving adoptees. I think it's a scale, and thriving is a scale, and we go up and down that scale, each and every one of us.
Mhm.
Whereas the world likes to categorize into.
Yeah.
And I guess even the title maybe categorizing. But there was a few more answers underneath, and she said, I would never come on. I would never come on the podcast because that would that would mean everybody would know that I'm an adoptee.
Oh.
So there obviously some shame. Well, not obviously, I suspect some shame running there. And yet she was typing that on a public. This wasn't in a closed group. This was underneath my thread. So, yeah, no logic is there. There's
confusing.
There is no logic. That's an interesting one for you.
Well, and you mentioned something there was shame, and I think, yes, a huge part of what makes reunion challenging is there is so much shame all over the place, right? As adoptees, we certainly carry shame generally. First mothers, usually unless they have done just a lot of their own self-worth, work, however they've done that, however they've even allowed themselves to talk about their relinquishment, that yes, so much shame bound up there. And adoptive parents do too. And if everybody's operating in this space of shame, it's really hard to build healthy relationships, right? That's not exactly a foundation for open communication and attunement. And so that it
and
is,
hence low expectations.
yeah, because you don't know, like in my case, when I found my birth mother twice before we actually even spoke, once through a confidential intermediary and once through DNA. And, this was a secret. She was told by her parents, you keep this secret or else, I don't know what the or else was, but if she was going to keep her baby, she was going to be kicked out of the house. That was part of the rules. And so she's kept it all this time, and yeah, my gosh. So it's frightening to have this person show up and be like, oh, hey, here I am. And I'm also contacting other people in your family. And it's, it's rough. And if people don't want to go get their own help and look at their own stuff, it's very challenging. And I think that's not unusual. I think that's really, really common. Yeah.
And a strange proof came to my mind as we were talking about that, right? Because we've had I've just forgotten her name. We've had a few birth mums on the show.
Yeah.
Yvonne Rivers, she runs
that's who I thought about when you said that. Okay.
She runs a birth mum podcast.
Yeah, I love that.
But how many are there? How many are there? Right. So how many adopted? So yeah, how many adoptive parent? How many podcasts are for adoptive parents? Loads. How many podcasts for adoptees? Probably, maybe not quite as many, but there's a sizable number. How many are for birth moms? I mean, that's an indication of that's an indication of the shame thing, for sure.
Yeah, and I love what she's doing. And then I think the other one, Twisted Sisters, right? Is that one? I'm going to get it wrong. But anyways, what they're doing is wonderful. And for the birth moms, and there's not very many that I've worked with, hearing stories, it's almost more intense from like, I can't believe it. Oh my gosh, there's people that are having my own experience. I hear that with adoptees when they first find the adoptee podcasts, but it's almost more intense, the birth moms that I've worked with, when they hear their own stories out there, or they go to CUB, the Concerned United Birth Parents we have out here in the United States. It's just like, oh my gosh, it's opening up light into this very dark closet. And yeah.
So one of before I hit the record button, listeners, we had a topic in mind of finding balance. but we've spoken for like 3/4 of an hour without that.
Yeah.
What why did finding balance kind of resonate? Why did that seem something worth exploring?
I think when we were initially talking, and I think about so much of the work I'm doing as a therapist, but just in my own life, it's how do I manage grief and allowing myself to experience, this fundamental loss, the sadness and the upset and the anger that comes up when these relationships in reunion are not quite right at all, sometimes. How do I manage all this work of being adopted? Because it's a lot for us, and balance that with the relationships that I do have in my life, or anybody's life, my client's life, these that are rich and rewarding. How do I balance, the joys that I have, the hobbies I have, the interests I have, and allowing myself to kind of oscillate, I guess, between I can do the deep work, but I don't have to stay in that place 24/7. I can also go out to dinner with my friends and have a great conversation. I can also, go for a run. I can also, there's our life is varied, and being able to find, I think that this balance between all the things that make up our identity is is the work of life, I guess. Does that?
It does. And what came to me is as best you can.
Right. Yeah. And reminding yourself all the time, I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and we just released an episode today, or I haven't released it yet, but it'll be going live, about grace. And grace
That's what I
is
was just thinking about when you said that. So the other piece of that, I'm doing the best I can. It is allowing for the other people in your life are probably doing the best they can too. And we can offer grace both outward and inward. Does that kind
yes,
of, yeah,
it is, and
Mhm.
it is I think as best we can.
Yeah.
And the other thing about balance that struck me is, so people need new things to pitch, right? So somebody creates this concept called work-life balance, and then they can talk to the CEOs of these big companies and say, have you got work-life balance? No, I haven't. Okay, well, pay me and I'll help you to it. It's kind of like
I'll
it's
make you
made
feel
up.
bad about the fact nobody has it.
Sorry?
I'll make you feel bad about the fact nobody has it.
Yes,
Yeah.
I will stir up your pain. Yes,
Yeah.
I will stir up your pain. And like when you said 700 emails, I'm just thinking that's nuts. But this negative, and we're into this negativity bias thing again here, right? And if we think of as you were talking about negativity bias, and I was thinking about newspapers. So I don't know if they're the same as in the States as they are in Britain, but obviously now we haven't got COVID. The journalists won't scare as much. They won't scare as much with the COVID headline now, because that's kind of old news. So we've got this cost of living crisis. Have you got this thing? There's a cost of living crisis. Well, the pubs seem to be still quite busy to me. I'm still walking past people in the street with shopping bags. Still people going, having Botox, having eyebrows threaded, smoking, drinking. Like we're all still functioning. Despite the fact we have had a lot of things have gone up. A lot of things going on, but the negativity bias, it's you're talking about that evolutionary thing, evolutionary brain. Is it mammalian? I can't remember. Is it reptile? It's the back one, and it's there to alert us to danger. And so what the newspapers are trying to do, because they've got to sell the newspapers, so they have to put a scary headline on to get our attention, to bring us in, to think I need to understand this threat, and then I can manage my life or manage the threat. That's essentially what the newspaper's doing. And I was thinking it's exactly the same with some of the titles of literature in the adoptee space. You know, like The Body Keeps the Score. That scares the bejesus out of me. The Primal Wound, that scares the bejesus out of me too. People have picked authors, publishers have picked intentionally scary titles to try and shock us out of our comfort, alert us to a danger, and then, oh right, I didn't know the body kept the score. Oh, well, I better write that. You know, like, well, oh yeah, that feels right to me. I better buy that book and find out what it's more about. You know,
we can get that shot of adrenaline, right? And it gets us. And I think, you know, this applies to all people. You know, we just came out of 3 years of adrenaline spiking headlines that actually we did need to pay some degree of attention to, right? And this, you know, the impact on all of our bodies at this point, depending, and especially, you know, depending on what you did for a living during that time, how you were impacted. Yeah, I think we all don't know what we're just holding on to at this point. And to be able to offer ourselves a good amount of grace when we're having big reactions to small things. It's like, oh, self, it's okay. We're safe, you know, like, yeah, and there was something else I wanted to say on that, but I lost. Oh, what I was thinking about was, for me, a lot of times I'll see these and I'm like, okay, this is too much. This cannot be. What is the truth? And with adoptee stuff, I think it's important, right? But then I kind of go to where I can get to scholarly articles where they're really boring and they're like, here's the method, here's the discussion. And it's like, okay, can I get some calm information? And I can, you know, what I need to know what's happening beneath all the yelling. And to be honest, that's kind of what I do in therapy too. I want to know what's happening beneath all the noise so we can get to what's real. And I think that's where you can get back to feeling a degree of humanity and balance. I really do, even if you're looking at really hard things.
Yeah.
But they're not the spiky adrenaline-y things, you know, those are just noise. And sometimes we, you know, I'll go down the rabbit hole sometimes. Yeah.
So I'm thinking of I'm thinking of the headlines and two different sorts of headlines and my two different responses to it, actually. So around the you know, the credit crunch, whatever it was, 2007, 2009, around then, I was running the business and people were telling me not to look at the headline. And then I think about when the pandemic came along. Yeah, you were right. I wanted to know what was going on. I was listening, you know, we were tuning in to listen to our beloved Boris, and he was hopeless. Yeah, he didn't. Yeah, he struggled a little bit. Kate is
you're back.
It's just frozen. Sorry.
Yeah.
I lost you for a minute there. Sorry.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back now.
Yeah, I'm back. I think my internet protected me from saying something negative about our political leader.
Oh, right. So I want to come up with
during the pandemic, by the way.
During the pandemic, yeah. I came up with this idea last week, and you're the first person that I've had a chance to talk about it. So I'll give it a go. So the idea is it's this it's called a spiritual stab vest. Spiritual stab vest, right? So it's going to this point where the fact that we're not our feelings, we're not our wounds. We have this. I have felt wounded, but all along I've had this spiritual stab vest on, which has safeguarded the essence of me from my feelings. Does that make any sense?
Oh, yes. And I don't know if I would say feelings, but maybe, yeah. You're talking
Okay.
about, are you talking about like essential self,
Yeah.
sort of?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm and the idea came to, I brought it up because you're talking about about going deeper, right? So on the top, you're talking about the top, the thoughts bit, and the noise. Yeah, I think that was so. Past the noise, we're going to the feelings beneath the noise, and then I'm looking at our essential self beyond the feelings, beyond the trauma.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and I think, a lot of times, tell me if this resonates for you, this idea of when things are feeling like there's different parts of you that might be pulling you, like younger parts, angry parts, whatever. And you can kind of settle, like, I don't know if it's a deep breath for you or whatever it is. It's like, how do I get back into this kind of self energy? Does that kind of resonate? Like my
Yeah.
essential, I think of it as like my essential self, my calm adult self, but I think of it as self energy, and this kind of like, okay, I'm back.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like either. Can I tell you?
Sure.
This idea, and I think Paul Sunderland said it, but I think I may have heard you allude to it. This idea of we didn't have a personality before trauma, like only trauma, like that, no, I don't like that one bit. We were born and we were held in utero just like everyone else. We did have a pretty, harsh beginning that has impact, and it is trauma. And I don't want to minimize that whatsoever. But I think we had, we had a self before trauma, and we had, we had personalities, we had temperament before trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whenever I get near this, I
Mhm.
get to that. I go to that quote by the guy who
Yeah.
says, "We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience."
Yeah, I like
Spiritual
that.
beings, right? So the
Make it a
spirit, So for me, the trauma is
Mhm.
in human experience,
Mhm.
but we're the spiritual being.
Yes.
So I'm separating who I am from the trauma I've been through. I'm separating who I am from the feelings. And that's where this idea of a spiritual stab vest came in, right? So I have, like, I've got like, this is, is this triggering? I don't know. Sorry, listeners. I'm gonna, if it's like the gunshot, it's like a vest, right? So if somebody gets shot and there's a vest on, they've got a gun vest on, then they feel the pain. Yeah, they feel the pain when the bullet hits their Kevlar, but then they take and they take the Kevlar off, and there's
Ultimately, they're safe. Yeah.
ultimately they're safe.
Mhm.
And that's the awareness piece. That's the awareness piece, the consciousness. That's identifying as the spiritual being rather than the human experience. It's way more profound than personality. Like, so people people have one personality at school, then they go to college, and they reinvent themselves, right? They reinvent themselves. So they reinvent their personality. And we're talking about stuff here that's more profound than deeper than trauma, deeper than personality, deeper than feeling, deeper than thoughts.
Yeah.
Essential self. And if that's too weird and too complicated, you offered a far simpler path. I have that essential self feeling. I sometimes have that feeling when I get into bed, and the tasks of the day are behind me, and it just goes into a quiet space.
Yeah.
And then sometimes in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, you wake up and the brain starts going into overdrive, and it starts coming into this negativity bias, and it's awake, and it's taking the peace has been replaced by the noise, but where the peace is still there underneath them.
Yeah. And the key, it seems like there, and it says easy does hard, but how to kind of get you're talking about a vest, right? Spiritual, getting that back on, so you can kind of center right back into that and let the worry be kind of like, it's here, but it's not hurting you. That might be the work. Yeah. Anyways, I don't know, just thinking about it.
Yeah. The other thing about balance, when you came up with the idea of finding balance, the metaphor that came to me was the tightrope walker. And the tightrope walker, hanging, they've got the bar, the horizontal bar that they're holding out in front of them.
Yeah.
They are never actually in balance. They're always, it's always adjusting or just a little bit, and it's very rare. Well, you see them do this at the last 2 foot. Sometimes they go straight and they just jump onto the platform at the end. But otherwise, they're taking the time, and they're never in balance. There is no such thing as balance. Balance is a concept.
Yeah. And that brings up a really good point that I was thinking about earlier, is it's very rare that things are going to be perfectly balanced, right? Like, I'm going to do work this amount of time, relationship this amount of time, whatever. That's just not right. Sometimes I'm going to be doing more work because that's what's demanded of me. It's what's necessary, not because I'm, out of balance, because it's just necessary. Sometimes my family, maybe somebody's very sick or they've died, and my family is going to take more time because that's what's needed. But as long as that balancing, which is probably a better word, is intentional, and we're intentionally thinking about, okay, what am I doing? What deserves my time and attention? What do I want just to get my time and attention? What a concept. As long as we can be thinking about that as much as possible, so that we're balancing things in a way that is appropriate for our desires, for the people we're committed to and that we're responsible to, that I think is
I love the distinction you draw between balance and balancing, because balance is a concept. Balancing is an action, and that's what the tightrope worker is doing. They are balancing. They never achieve balance. They are balancing. What are we doing in life? We are balancing, and we're balancing as best we can. And we are giving ourselves grace when we're out of balance, when the kilter is off for some reason.
Yeah, I think that's just right.
Beautiful. So is there anything else that you'd like to share that we've not touched on, Kate?
So I think we ended up someplace really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that seems like enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you like to call the episode?
Well, I like balancing as best we can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or something in that realm, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a there's an honesty to that, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's no what's it, hyperbole. There's no.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, listeners. We'll speak to you very soon. And obviously, sorry, I forgot to mention, like, if you always, every episode I put out, there's links in the show notes to the guests' socials and their website if they've got one. So if you're interested in finding more about what Kate does, then check her out in the show notes. Thanks, y'all. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.